The smell hit them first. It had been lingering for days, sharp, putrid, impossible to ignore. Some thought it was a dead animal near the dumpsters. Others assumed the bins hadn't been emptied. But nothing could have prepared them for the truth. By the morning of August 24th, 2021, the complaints had grown too loud to ignore. Residents at the 500 block of Coventry Road in southwest Baltimore had called the building management, urging someone to investigate the source of the odor coming from one specific unit. So, just after noon, a maintenance worker was sent to check apartment 1C. The door was locked, and no one had seen the tenant, or her children, in several days. He knocked, no answer. He knocked again, still nothing. Then he opened the door. What he saw stopped him cold. There was no sound, no movement, just the overwhelming stench of death. The air inside was thick, humid and rotting, and as his eyes adjusted to the dim apartment, he saw a sleeping bag on the living room floor, and inside it the body of a young child. He backed out immediately and called 911. Within minutes, Baltimore police arrived on scene, and what they discovered inside that small apartment was a scene so grim it sent a ripple of shock through the entire city. In the bathroom, they found another child, this one a little girl, lying face up in the tub. There was a piece of clothing wrapped tightly around her neck. Her body had already begun to decompose. In the living room, when the sleeping bag was unzipped and the boy's body was turned over, a large knife was found lodged in the right side of his chest. A plastic trash bag had been pulled over his face and tied around his head. They were identified as Davin Thomas Jr., age 8, and his younger sister, Jamerria Thomas, just 6 years old. Both children had been dead for several days. The advanced state of decomposition made it difficult to determine exactly when they were killed, but based on the last known sighting and statements from neighbors, investigators believed the murders likely occurred on the night of August 19th. By now, the crime scene had been locked down. Detectives and forensic teams moved methodically through the apartment, documenting evidence, collecting fibers, photographing every inch of the space. And while the facts inside the apartment painted a horrifying picture of what had happened to Davin and Jamerria, there was one question no one could yet answer. Where was their mother? But before the headlines, before the police reports, and before the unimaginable happened, there were just two children. Jamerria Thomas, 6 years old, was the kind of girl who brought energy into every room. She was playful and curious, often skipping across the courtyard of the Coventry Road apartment complex, with her brother close behind. She had a wide smile and an animated way of speaking that made even strangers smile back. Neighbors remembered how she always asked questions, sometimes silly, sometimes thoughtful, but always with that spark that made her feel older than her years. Her brother, Davin Thomas Jr., was 8. He was gentle and protective, especially when it came to Jamerria. Where she was bold, Davin was thoughtful. He had a calm presence that stood out, even among other kids. People in the neighborhood said he was polite and well-mannered. He was the kind of child who'd hold the door open for neighbors without being asked and say thank you without being reminded. Together, they were often seen outside, especially in the afternoons. They played by the parking lot, near the brick walls, or by a small tree stump close to the walkway. A man who walked his dog nearby told reporters he saw them almost every day. He said he'd sometimes let them pet his dog or hand them a little candy or change. He didn't know their names at first, but he knew their faces, and he knew they were always together. But then something changed. One neighbor recalled seeing the two children sitting by themselves at the stump, not playing, not talking, just sitting. That was unusual. Normally, their mother was close by, often sitting in the car that used to be parked out front. But this time, the car was gone, and the children looked different. I just asked, "Hey, how you guys doing?" The neighbor said. "They just kind of looked at me. They didn't look happy at all." That moment stuck with him. He didn't know it then, but that would be the last time he ever saw them alive. So when news broke that two children had been found dead in that same apartment building, faces he had seen so many times before, neighbors like him didn't just feel shocked. They felt a personal kind of grief, because Jamerria and Davin weren't just victims in a story. They were part of the neighborhood. They were real, and now they were gone. On the afternoon of August 19th, 2021, everything looked normal. at least on the surface. Later that night, something shifted. A neighbor, who lived just a few doors down, told investigators they heard what sounded like a child screaming. It wasn't the kind of scream kids make when they're playing or even arguing. It was sharper, desperate, and it repeated, "Mommy, no. Mommy, no." It was a short sentence, but it carried weight. The neighbor didn't know exactly where it came from, and they didn't call the police. Screams weren't unheard of in apartment complexes. Sometimes people fought, sometimes children cried, but this time was different. Police now believe that was the moment Jamerria and Davin were killed.
I'm weeping. I'm weeping because the kid, she didn't have to kill them kids. She didn't have to do it. I heard the kids around 11:30. Whoever was down there was picking these kids up and they was crying. And one kid said, "Mommy, no, mommy, no, mommy." And I heard a little boy through the floor was kind of crying. And right after that, I didn't hear anything else.
In the days that followed, no one saw the children again. But Jamerria, she was still around. One neighbor recalled seeing her near the trash area, throwing out what looked like toys, clothes, maybe even school supplies, things that obviously belonged to children. But no one questioned it. Most assumed she was decluttering or maybe replacing old items with new ones. After all, just a few weeks earlier, she had been outside in the grass with a can of sky blue spray paint, working on a small table for her kids. The color still stained the grass in uneven circles. It was the kind of scene that suggested care, like a mother trying to give her children something special. She had once posted online about how much she loved being their mother, despite the difficulties. She talked about wanting to do better for them. Neighbors believed her. And even in those final days, Jamerria looked like someone trying. But behind the surface of trying, something much darker had already taken root. The screams had faded. The children were gone. And no one, not the neighbors, not her family, not even the community that saw them every day, realized it until it was far too late. Detectives worked methodically, photographing every item, collecting fibers, swabbing surfaces for DNA. They combed through the apartment for anything that might explain what happened, or who was responsible. And then they found the ID cards. Left out in the open were documents and identification belonging to Jamerria Hall, the children's mother. They weren't hidden or discarded. In fact, it was as if she had never planned to be gone for long. But she wasn't there, and no one had seen her. Officers canvassed the complex, knocking on doors, asking neighbors when they'd last seen her. Some said she'd been around a few days earlier, walking alone. Others mentioned her acting strangely, talking to herself, cursing at no one in particular. But no one knew where she was now. As the sun began to set that Tuesday evening, police had 2 dead children, a crime scene filled with unanswered questions, and a mother who had suddenly vanished.
I just seen the kids, so I kind of like got a little personal with them. "Hey, how you guys doing? I don't see your family out here no more. Normally you guys are in the car." And they just kind of like looked at me, like they didn't look happy at all.
This all started because of a complaint from neighbors about an odor coming from the apartment. That's when police were called and they made the gruesome discovery, and still today they are airing out the building.
And so the search began. By the time investigators found the children's bodies on August 24th, Jamerria Hall had already started laying down a story, a version of events that didn't line up with reality, but gave the appearance that everything was under control. It began with a phone call to her mother just one day earlier, on August 23rd. "I'm in the hospital," she said. "The kids are with their father." To anyone else, that might have sounded reassuring. It suggested the children were safe and accounted for. It also gave her an alibi, however vague. But that story collapsed almost immediately. When police reached out to Davin Thomas Sr., the children's father, he made it clear he hadn't seen the kids, not recently, not even in passing. He didn't know where they were. And more importantly, he hadn't seen Jamerria either, not until August 24th, the very day their bodies were discovered. And when he did see her, something was clearly wrong. He told investigators that she was wandering aimlessly near North Avenue and Bloomingdale Road. She was walking alone, screaming, cursing, and talking to no one in particular. She looked disoriented, possibly under the influence of something, and didn't acknowledge him or anyone else. It wasn't just unusual behavior, it was alarming.
The children's father told police the day the children were discovered, he observed the mom walking down the street, screaming and cursing at no one, and appeared to be under the influence.
So when police put out a description and started tracking down leads, it didn't take long for someone to come forward. Another witness told detectives they had seen Jamerria that same week, inside an Uber, headed east through Baltimore. The ride was taking her toward Philadelphia Road and Russellville Boulevard, a commercial stretch in Baltimore County. She hadn't gone far, but she had clearly tried to distance herself from the scene. Acting quickly, authorities coordinated with the Special Enforcement Response Team. The next day, on August 25th, they located the Uber, and inside it, they found Jamerria Hall. She didn't resist, she didn't run. She was taken into custody without incident and transported back to Baltimore for questioning.
According to the documents, a witness telling police she had gotten into an Uber and was heading for Baltimore County. There, she was taken into custody and later gave a full admission into detail as to how she murdered both of her children.
The woman who had just told her mother she was in the hospital, who had claimed the children were with their father, who had walked the streets of Baltimore talking to herself, was now sitting in an interrogation room, facing the weight of what had been discovered inside apartment 1C. And the story she told next was nothing like the one she told before. Once Jamerria Hall was brought in for questioning, investigators didn't waste time. They informed her of her rights. She was calm, composed, even. And then, without hesitation, she waived her Miranda rights. And then she began to speak. What followed was a confession that investigators described as chilling in its detail and directness. Jamerria admitted to killing both of her children, Daneria, age 6, and Davin, age 8. She described the night of August 19th, when the last screams were heard. She didn't offer a long explanation. She didn't claim self-defense or an accident. She simply told them what she did. The specific details of how each child died had already been confirmed by the forensic team. Her statement matched the scene perfectly. The sleeping bag, the knife, the bathtub, the clothing item around her daughter's neck. It all aligned. But what stood out most wasn't just what she said. It was what she didn't. Jamerria Hall gave no motive. There was no clear reason stated in the interview, no emotional outburst, no attempt to justify. And that silence, the absence of explanation, was, in many ways, more disturbing than the confession itself. Police didn't need more. That same night, she was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. Each charge reflected the brutality of the crime, the vulnerability of the victims, and the complete betrayal of the trust between a mother and her children. She was held without bond and transferred to the Central Booking Intake Facility in Baltimore. No bail hearing was set. No public statement was made by her family. And in the days that followed, the community waited, trying to understand how a woman who had once been seen spray painting a table for her children in the front yard could be the same person who calmly confessed to taking their lives. But the truth was out now, and the case against Jamerria Hall was only just beginning. As news of Jamerria Hall's confession spread, the public's initial reaction was disbelief. People who knew her, or thought they did, struggled to reconcile the mother they'd seen playing outside with her kids with a woman now facing 2 counts of murder. But then, reporters began digging deeper, and what they uncovered was a disturbing chapter that many had either forgotten or never known. In October 2018, nearly 3 years before the murders, Jamerria Hall had already been in serious trouble. According to court records, she had set fire to her mother's home, while her 2 children were inside. The house was located on Upmanor Road, not far from where she was later arrested. That night, she had disabled every smoke detector in the home. Then she took family photographs, clothing, and sentimental objects and lit them on fire in different rooms. But it wasn't random. Police described the way she arranged the items as intentional, almost ceremonial. On the dining table, she had laid out burned photos in a circular pattern. On the sofa, she'd carefully placed mementos in what appeared to be a shrine, a symbolic display of family and memory, consumed by fire. In one upstairs bedroom, police found a frying pan filled with ashes, fragments of photos she had burned separately, in isolation. After setting the fires, Jamerria didn't stay at the scene. She left with her children and was found the next day in a hospital. She didn't deny what she had done. In fact, she told police she was the one responsible for the blaze.
And they say she had a history of violence.
They should have furthered the investigation because you set your own house on fire with your kids in it. So CPS should have took my opinion, CPS should have took the kids right away.
She was charged with first-degree arson and child endangerment. Prosecutors called the fire deliberate and reckless. But instead of receiving the maximum sentence, she took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served just 1. The rest of her sentence was suspended. After her release, she filed for custody of Jamerria and Davin, and she got it. The children's father never appeared in court, and without opposition, the judge granted Jamerria full custody.
A Maryland case search found that she pled guilty to first-degree arson for lighting her mother's house on fire with the children inside. She served a year in jail and was granted custody of the kids because the father didn't show up to a court hearing. Commissioner Harrison said the department would review Hall's child custody history as part of their investigation. But what's not clear is what action CPS or Child Protective Services took. Attorney Mark Sherman is not directly involved in the case, but he says usually CPS would have investigated after the 2018 charge of arson, a case he called undercharged.
Mental health is a huge problem these days, and I'm very sure mental health was a critical problem in this kind of situation here, unaddressed mental health problems. And so what we may have here is a situation where there was no proper CPS investigation done and no rehabilitation, no treatment, no accountability for what had been done in 2018, which sort of brought us here to today.
There was no documented pushback from Child Protective Services, no mental health evaluation ordered by the court, no required parenting classes, and no follow-up from investigators who knew she had once set a home on fire with her kids inside. She walked out of jail and walked right back into motherhood, without restriction, without oversight.
Good evening, Kelly. According to 2018 charging documents, Hall set her mother's apartment on fire with the children inside. Those documents say that Hall was removing smoke detectors and destroying some of them, and then she lit photographs and other items on fire around the apartment. Police found her and the children at the hospital the next day. The children were questioned by the child abuse unit. I took these concerns up with an attorney about how that could possibly happen, how she could regain custody after all of that, and given her documented past.
In the weeks following her arrest, investigators, and eventually the public, turned to Jamerria Hall's digital footprint, searching for answers in the only place she had left them, her Facebook page. What they found wasn't a profile of a monster. It wasn't filled with rage or violent outbursts. Instead, it showed something far more complicated, a woman trying to hold herself together. Post after post revealed a mother caught in emotional contradiction. One moment, she was praising her children. The next, she was quietly unraveling. She wrote, "Being your mom was never easy, but worth it." In another post, she added, "Love you to the moon and back." And in perhaps the most heartbreaking of them all, she captioned a photo of her kids. "My 2 little best friends. A bond that can never be broken." These weren't just captions. They were glimpses into a mental state that was fraying beneath the surface. And it didn't stop there.
This evening I have
Jamerria Thomas Joy.
And I have
Davin Thomas.
The voices of 2 young siblings, now a haunting memory of their short lives. This recording from their mother Jamerria Hall's podcast, posted just a year before police say she killed them.
Jamerria openly wrote about her mental health struggles, not once, but often. She said she was battling depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And in a detailed post, she revealed she also suffered from myofascial pain syndrome, MPS, a chronic condition that causes persistent pain triggered by stress and muscle tension. According to her, it had worsened during the pandemic. She wrote, "In the beginning of the 2020 pandemic, I found myself going back into depression. I was not able to work because my family needed me at home." She described attending monthly probation office visits, navigating physical pain and psychological weight, all while raising 2 children alone. She mentioned trying alternative therapies, CBD products, homemade remedies, and then decided to turn that struggle into something she could market. That's when she launched her CBD business, promoting drinks, edibles, and topical solutions. She marketed her products as a way to heal not just physically, but emotionally. And along the way, she started a podcast called Be More Charming, a play on Baltimore's nickname. The podcast mixed humor, parenting, and moments of raw honesty. In one episode, she spoke directly to her children. "Y'all been driving me crazy, but I love y'all." You could hear one of them, likely Jamerria, replying softly in the background, "I love you too."
And I have 2 little mini-me's tonight. This evening I have
Jamerria Thomas Joy.
and I have
Davin Thomas.
1 year ago, Jamerria recorded this podcast with her 2 children.
Y'all been driving me crazy, but I love y'all.
I too.
Okay.
Okay.
They were like a trio. If you saw her, you saw them.
Their neighbor, who did not want to be identified, says her own daughter and Jamerria were best friends.
Jamerria and my daughter would play in the hallway.
Calling Jamerria an attentive mother. That neighbor says this spray paint on the grass is from where Jamerria recently painted a table for her kids.
It was beautiful. It was like the blue sky, the beautiful blue sky with the white clouds.
Now the family's neighbor wonders how she'll tell her daughter that her best friend is gone.
I have no clue how I'm going to explain this to my baby, because she played with them every day.
To outsiders, it painted the picture of a mother who cared, one who struggled, yes, but who still showed up, still tried, still loved.
Mayor Brandon, everybody, step up to the plate. Do something for this family. Take care of this situation. Don't let them have to think about it. Don't let them have to wonder. Do what's necessary for these children.
A memorial for the children is growing in front of the apartment complex where police found their bodies on Tuesday. Neighbors who often saw the children playing outside are heartbroken.
Just playing in the yard, like, they seemed so happy. They spoke to my daughter and everything. It's just crazy that happened to them. Like, we live right next door.
But to those who looked closer, these posts weren't just reflections. They were warning signs. Signs of someone spinning in silence, trying to appear stable while posting confessions of instability, trying to parent while silently crumbling, trying to be present while clearly pleading, though maybe not out loud, for help. And now, every sentence, every video, every caption was being read again, not with curiosity, but with hindsight. What had once seemed like exhaustion now looked like a crack in the foundation. What once passed as vulnerability now read like a prelude to collapse. And the question that started to form wasn't just, how did this happen? It was, why didn't anyone see it coming? Following her arrest and formal charges, Jamerria Hall was assigned a public defender. And while the weight of the case against her was undeniable, her behavior, both in custody and during initial questioning, raised immediate concerns about her mental state. Her attorney moved quickly, requesting a competency evaluation, arguing that Jamerria might not fully understand the charges against her or be capable of assisting in her own defense. The court agreed, and the request was granted. That evaluation took place behind closed doors, but the conclusion was made public soon after. On September 3, 2021, just 10 days after her arrest, a Baltimore judge ruled that Jamerria Hall was not competent to stand trial. The evaluation confirmed what many had already begun to suspect. She was not mentally fit to participate in court proceedings. As a result, the case was officially moved to the inactive docket. This didn't mean the charges were dropped, or that she would escape trial entirely. It simply meant that, for now, the legal process had to pause. Jamerria was then committed to a mental health facility, where she would remain under psychiatric supervision. She could no longer stay at the city jail, nor proceed through the court system, until a team of doctors determined that she was mentally stable enough to understand the legal process and actively assist her defense team. There is no set timeline. Some people regain competency in weeks. Others take years. And in rare cases, they never do. For now, Jamerria Hall remained in limbo, neither convicted nor acquitted, but legally frozen in place, while the community she left behind tried to make sense of what had happened. 2 children were gone. A mother had confessed. But justice, whatever that would ultimately look like, was still waiting in the wings. So, what do you think about this case? What do you think could have been done by the system, by the community, or even by those closest to Jamerria to prevent this from happening? Could more mental health support have made a difference? Should the custody decision have been more closely reviewed? Or was this a tragedy no one could have seen coming? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. We read every one of them, because real stories like this don't just deserve to be told, they deserve to be understood. And if you've ever seen warning signs like this where you live, or have had a similar experience in your community, share that too. Your story could be the one that helps someone else recognize the danger before it's too late. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video if it moved you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.